And there we are. Hello. Welcome to a bonus Raw Sport Quaran-Stream from Raw Sport, your sports department of the University of Warwick student radio station, award-winning student radio station, I should add. It's good to be on the air, sort of, or on the internet waves, I guess, talking about some massive news that came across on Monday, that culminated in Monday, rather. And we normally do Raw Sport Weekly, but it does feel like this piece of football news will probably be the biggest news of the week. And so as you know, when kind of planning these shows out, we did think that this was something that was going to take more than just the average Quaran-Stream. This was something we could sort of deep dive into, which is really exciting. We got a number of guests here with me to talk about this, so I'm excited. And let's take this off. Yes, I am your head of sport, Josh Sim. Thank you for watching along. And if you're watching on YouTube and Facebook, in the video description, you can check out the social media links to all our social media. If you're watching us on Twitter, this is the first time we're broadcasting on Twitter, which is super exciting. Feel free to comment along during the stream, and we'll see how and see. I mean, I'm sure people will have opinions on this news, and of course, I should say, we are obviously talking about what's going on with Chelsea. What's going on? Frank Lampard was sacked on Monday. Thomas Tuchel has been appointed, and it looks like he'll be on the bench tonight against Wolves. At least that's what they're trying to get done. So, how much impact he'll have on the game? Probably not much, but he'll definitely be on the bench and be shown. Yes, hi to our friends at Raw News. Yeah, it's not Saturday, but there's not a whole lot of sporting action going on at the moment. Of course, next week we'll be talking more about the Super Bowl, and we've talked a bit about cricket recently, but this will be the big talking point, I think, for the week. And so we thought we'd hammer it now in a bonus Quaran-Stream. So with that, if you're new, if you're new to this stream from us, you can check out our YouTube channel, Raw Sport, where you can look at all the sort of streams we've done throughout this term and last term. And we're always looking for new people to kind of join our shows and be a panelist and kind of just talk about the stuff they want to talk about, especially, during a pandemic when, you can't really go to the pub and watch games anymore. This is sort of an avenue for you if you feel like it. So with that, let's bring on my guests. We'll start off with someone we haven't seen in a while, but a stalwart of the Raw Sport team, and someone who, as soon as I put this post out, this person I have strong opinions about Frank Lampard, and that's the biggest green light I need to bring them on. So Joe Spagnoli, welcome back. Hope, first of all, Happy New Year. I think it's the first stream we've done in 2021 with you.
Yeah, I think
so.
It is actually. Yeah, I think. Yeah, genuinely.
So well rested. No, I think this is the first one. So you're well rested. You've got your takes, and as I sort of prefaced, you've got plenty about this one, which we'll get to, which I can't wait to hear. Of course, we've got our department deputy, someone who's easily the regular. He did more of the hosting of the last Quaran-Stream than I did, so he's certainly well qualified to be on. It's Ben Parkinson. Ben, how are you?
Yep. Afternoon, Josh. Afternoon, Joe. Yeah, very well, thank you. Kind of shocking, but also not so shocking news on Monday, so can't wait to dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah, and for those who didn't watch Saturday's Quaran-Stream, we sort of talked a bit about it. Did we think it was going to happen this soon? We'll talk about that in just a bit, but it certainly ramped up quite quickly. And finally, we have our sort of Chelsea fan representative on the panel. We have Ninu, who's joined us, a Raw News regular, but first time on the Raw Sports show, which is exciting. So Ninu, welcome to the show.
Hello, I'm Ninu. Yeah, as Josh said, been a Chelsea fan for almost my entire life. And yeah, very excited to be on. Have a lot of opinions.
Yeah, I can imagine. So yes, let's just dive right into it, I guess. And we'll start with, I guess, all the events that sort of led up to this. Frank Lampard has been in the job for what? It doesn't feel long, 14 months or so. Someone can correct me on that, but it feels like something along. Yeah, 19 months or so. Yeah, so he's not been in the job for long. On Monday, despite, well, I don't know if the FA Cup win against Luton saved his job or not, but he was told by Roman Abramovich and the Chelsea hierarchy that his services were no longer required as manager. And we'll talk about his successor in a bit, but there was mixed reaction, I think it's fair to say. Certainly players like Thiago Silva came out and sort of gave a thank you message. And if you look at Twitter, which is a great place to find out footballing opinions, there was a wide range of opinions from, he should have been given more time to this was coming, Chelsea needed to act now. There was sort of a wide range. So I guess I start with you, Ninu, because you're the Chelsea fan here. Were you surprised on Monday to get the news that Frank Lampard was to be relieved of his duties and that it came now as opposed to, I don't know, at the end of the season?
I think if you know Roman Abramovich, you know only one thing, and that is he does not give managers time. I mean, deep down, I thought maybe since it's Frank Lampard, a man that is synonymous with Chelsea, that he would have been afforded a little more time. But when we lost to Leicester, I knew it was coming. I actually expected it to happen the day after we lost Leicester. But yeah, it was still a shock because Frank Lampard means so much to me and means so much to the Chelsea fan community. He means a lot to many of the players. It was still a shock, but in terms of Roman Abramovich's MO, this is nothing out of character for the man.
Yes, it wasn't. I mean, for those who I guess have followed the club, and you've certainly followed the club, this is sort of normal practice, I guess. It is, which I mean, it means it feels jarring. I mean, before I get to the others, I do want to ask: when Lampard was appointed, obviously there was a bit of hope that this was someone for the long term, someone who could grow with these current group of players and kind of develop them, and lead this team for a long time. Did you feel like when he was appointed that he could be someone who could kind of break the mold of Chelsea managers and be someone who the club trusted with the keys to the future, or were you worried that something like this could eventually happen down the road?
I mean, that's a hard one because I think a lot of Chelsea fans thought he's going to be our manager for a little while. Many of us, myself included, expected a rocky start. He hasn't been in management for a very long time. He did a fantastic job with Derby. Unfortunately, couldn't get them promoted, but still did a fantastic job with them. And he had shown that he believes in the youth. And we knew he had a good youth team. So we knew, but we did also know this isn't something that, you show up, you start playing our young players, you have a transfer ban. We've just lost our best player, Eden Hazard. John Terry is retired, all of this. We've lost a lot of players. And immediately, you can't expect immediate success. So a lot of people are looking at this as a long-term sort of view, very similar to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer at Man United, a rocky start, but eventually things will pick up. Unfortunately, it's sort of clear that Roman doesn't sort of believe in that. Roman believes in winning. And unfortunately, he's shown that with another, what is likely going to be another short-term hire in Thomas Tuchel.
Yeah. Well, we can definitely talk about Thomas Tuchel, the merits of hiring him or not. But Ben, I'll come to you as someone, you're a United fan, someone who follows a club who's also done sort of a similar approach, and I think were probably first. They appointed Ole before Frank, I guess, and then obviously Arteta subsequently at Arsenal. So there is sort of a trend going on at the moment with former players, club legends, in some ways getting jobs. What did you make of Lampard's appointment? I know, it will be like casting your mind back to 18 or 19 months ago, but were you, as a neutral and as a United fan, what was your thoughts on Lampard initially when he took the Chelsea job?
Initially, I thought way too early for him. I thought, for someone who has a legendary status there as a player, and for someone who has also been developing himself brilliantly at Derby as a manager, I thought it was going to be a big risk, especially, him more than anyone knowing how Chelsea like to sack their managers. So I thought it was a bit risky. Reflecting on it now, I almost sort of think that Chelsea potentially appointed him, bracing themselves for, we will eventually have to sack him. Look, it was at the time they were going to have a transfer ban, so they needed someone who worked with young players. And Frank Lampard has shown he worked really well with young players. He had Mason Mount, Tomori on loan there at Derby, and he'd already worked with them, and he'd shown that he could do that. So I almost think that Chelsea potentially just thought, right, let's appoint Frank Lampard. He can work well with these young players, and then, we'll back him in the summer. And then if it doesn't work out, we can sack him because he's a relatively young manager. They can afford to put him on lower wages and then sack him, and it makes it easier. And, obviously they appointed him before COVID, when obviously COVID may be making it a little bit harder with, for financial reasons to sack managers now. But I almost think, reflecting on it now, that could have been a thing of Chelsea. I don't think they were ever scared to have to sack him. And I think that obviously already put Frank Lampard on the back foot. He doesn't have success behind him. He's very different to all of the previous Chelsea managers. And that's why I think people thought, okay, they're going to go down this new road. But let me cast your mind back to when everyone said they're going to go down this new road by just playing academy players and bringing through the academy. Well, they've proven that wrong by going out and splashing the cash this summer on, dozens of new recruits. And then they've also proven it wrong that they're not going to stick with a manager and go long term. They are also going to stick to their short term buy for success kind of routes. And you can say you don't like it or whatever, but it's worked for them, so it kind of makes sense why they're doing it. Of course it does. But yeah, I guess it sort of changes, because I was quite shocked when it initially happened, but I thought it made sense. And then now he's been sacked. I also think that, once you get over that initial shock, you're just like, it was always going to happen. It was a matter of if. No, it's a matter of when rather than if.
Yeah. And Joe, unlike a lot of his predecessors, I guess, Lampard inherited Chelsea in very different circumstances. Obviously, there was a transfer ban. I can't remember at the time if it was in place. I believe it was. So the club knew that whoever came in was not going to have transfer funds. This was a guy who had worked, obviously, at Derby. He had the likes of Mason Mount on loan, and so had inspired them to, beforehand, to up until that point, their best form of their career. It sort of made sense that if a big named manager couldn't and knew they couldn't spend funds on bringing in players of their own, it sort of made sense that Chelsea went down the whole bringing in one of their own, a young manager, to kind of build up with this young crop of English players. And once the transfer ban was then removed, then be able to kind of marry up the two approaches. So on paper, it certainly seemed it made some sort of sense, but I don't know. Do you agree with that, or do you feel like we were still on shaky ground with him given that he only had really 1 or 2 seasons at Derby and on limited sort of experience, I guess, in the Premier League, managing wise?
One season at Derby where honestly he didn't even perform that much higher than expectations, or in my opinion even match expectations. That Derby team could have been promoted quite easily, but as we'll get onto later, Frank Lampard's defensive deficiencies really did let them down. I think the idea of appointing someone whose CV consisted of shocked Leeds but not quite Villa doesn't really make an awful lot of sense. However, what you need to remember, 2 things. Number 1, Chelsea's attitude, as Ben alluded to, of sacking managers constantly has actually worked really well for them relative to other teams like Liverpool and Spurs who try to go for projects. Chelsea have won a hell of a lot more trophies since Abramovich came in. Conte won the Premier League in his first season and then the FA Cup. Maurizio Sarri, who they treated disgracefully, won the Europa League about a week before he was pushed off to Juventus. Mourinho, let's not even get into what he achieved. Roberto Di Matteo won the Champions League. So in the short-term strategy, this makes absolute sense. And what you've got to remember is that in the wake of how they treated Mourinho after winning the Premier League, way how they treated Conte after winning the Premier League and how they treated Sarri after winning the Europa League. I don't think Chelsea was as appealing to continental managers as they had been, at least for in the short-term period. And so they decided to go with what was in vogue at the time, appointing an ex-player. Obviously, Solskjaer at United was doing okay around that time, so it made sense to bring in someone super frank, especially when the fans were in the stadiums. And incidentally, Rio Ferdinand made the point that if the fans had been in the stadium this year chanting super frank, irrespective of how badly his team was defending, chances are he may have been given a bit more time. However, the truth is, Josh, that the moment rumours start coming out about Chelsea managers getting the sack, and let's be honest, Frank Lampard got away with this for a hell of a long time without getting criticism for his obvious tactical deficiencies. The moment that starts, the moment when even those biased hacks at BT and Sky Sport are actually willing to criticise an English manager when they fail, you know the decision's coming soon. I'm just surprised that they've decided to do it in the last week of the January transfer window rather than the first.
Yeah, there's sort of shades of the Pochettino sacking. Spurs left it until I think the last few days of the international break before bringing in a new manager. So there's sort of shades of that as well. Nino, I did want to ask, I mean, obviously he is being sacked based on this season's results, but how did you judge him last season? Obviously they came fourth. They qualified for the Champions League again. In the Champions League, they made it to the last 16 before being knocked out by, admittedly, what was seen as a juggernaut of a team in Bayern Munich. So there's no shame in that. What did you make of his results last season, and did it fill you with hope coming into this season that the team could kick on? And obviously with the big money signings that were made in terms of Timo Werner and Kai Havertz and Ben Chilwell, that this team could potentially at least push the likes of Liverpool, Man City a lot closer than they had in years beforehand?
It's a bit of a mixed bag. I was very happy with finishing fourth. Again, Lampard's second season ever in management. A very young team with not a lot of experience in them. You know, Tammy Abraham, Mason Mount, Fiaco Tomori, Andreas Christensen, Reece James, to an extent, Billy Gilmore on like one or two matches. But, you know, they all sort of came into the team, did a good job. I thought all of them did a really good job. And then, you know, we had a transfer ban. We'd lost our best player, Eden Hazard, who towards the end, especially towards the end of Sarri's run, probably the entirety of Sarri's run, we basically depended on Eden Hazard, and we just lost him. We'd had a string of strikers that basically refused to score goals for us ever since Conte made the terrible decision of letting go of Diego Costa. You know, we had Morata who couldn't score. We had Higuain who couldn't score. Giroud is good. Giroud is a very good striker, arguably better than Tammy Abraham, but was getting up there in age, didn't start a lot. But basically, I was very happy with last season, and it filled me with a lot of hope, especially after the transfer window. I thought Havertz was a needless signing. If I'm being incredibly honest, I thought Havertz was completely needless. I wasn't happy with the Havertz signing. I thought it was a waste of money. But, you know, we got Thiago Silva on a free. We got Edouard Mendy for cheap, who I know didn't have any reputation, but because he's a goalkeeper that isn't Kepa, I was very happy. You know, Timo Werner, Hakim Ziyech are both brilliant. Were at the time considered very brilliant signings, and most importantly, Ben Chilwell. Because I know Joe mentioned defensive deficiencies. I'm not going to pretend like Lampard's amazing defensively, but up until our bad run of form this season, we did have one of the best defenses in the entire league. I think the biggest sticking point has been individual errors for Lampard. I think the biggest thing that's screwed us over this season hasn't been, I mean, obviously Lampard's failure to adapt has been important, but individual errors have heavily cost us. Timo Werner doesn't look like the striker he was last year. Kai Havertz is invisible. When he plays, I physically can't see him playing. Ben Chilwell's been good, but the centre halves are not performing up to the standard. And even in recent games, Mendy's been making mistakes. It's a lack of confidence. And but to answer your question, yeah, I did have hope, but clearly that didn't carry through to the players, because as soon as the results stopped going our way, I think it was that first loss to Everton that immediately crushed morale in the camp.
Yeah, and I mean, you may have a point about individual errors because, and I will turn this over to you, Ben. I look at Chelsea's results, and they're not bad. I mean, granted, they've only lost in terms of Premier League matches. They've only lost 6 games of what is it? Game week 20 now, game week 19. So it's not. I mean, a third of their games lost isn't that bad. Champions League wise, they had a strong finishing in the group. They finished top of the group. It's not everything seems on paper to be terrible. I mean, I suppose the one thing of their results that kind of jars out is that the caliber of teams they lost to being teams they were sort of expected to challenge, be it Leicester, they've lost to Wolves, they've lost to Arsenal, Everton, and then of course Liverpool, Man City. Is that why? I guess is that sort of ineffectiveness in front of sort of the so-called bigger teams been a reason why Lampard's remained in the spotlight? Have those wins against the likes of Brighton, Crystal Palace, Sheffield United, do they kind of mask over the sort of cracks that was starting to kind of form in this Chelsea side?
Yeah, I think so. I think the thing is, I think they're in 10th place, 6 points off top 4, which doesn't sound bad at all. But that's in a season where, a lot of things are switching around quickly. But I think the main problem has just been the performances. They're just, I think especially in the Leicester one, it just looked like they weren't willing to run. And I think that is the most obvious sign. If your players aren't running for your manager, then they got to go. And I think that's what happened there. I think, ultimately he didn't get enough out of his best players, out of his star signings. We know that, Timo Werner and Kai Havertz, we know there's a lot of other, obviously, factors going on there. But I think with the defensive issues, and actually I think issues all over the pitch, there was just a lack of consistency. He was chopping and changing the team every single week, and it wasn't just rotation. He had no idea what his best centre-back pairing were. One week it was Zuma and Thiago Silva. The next week it was Rudiger and Thiago Silva. He was chopping and changing. Ben Chilwell was pretty consistent, I'll admit, but Reece James made quite a few errors, so they brought in Azpilicueta, but he got bullied in the games I watched. So, and up front as well, Giroud's starting. Now Tammy Abraham's starting. Timo Werner's going to play on the left. Doesn't work out either. Kai Havertz didn't work on the right. There are countless things that just weren't working in the system. And I put that down, these are not bad players. Everyone talked about in the summer, right, Chelsea look like they're going to buy the title again because they have recruited fantastically. They've recruited big. They've got the big names. They've done it again and they're going to go. And, frankly, if you look at this year, there is no out and out kind of, domination that's going on. And I think that's because of Chelsea, I think, have the right. They should be up there. The way they're recruited in the summer, Frank Lampard have been there a year now. They've integrated also some of the academy. They looks like they have a good balance of experience and youth. So I was like, yeah, I mean, I can see Chelsea winning the title. And I think that's why they had to bring Tuchel in, because he can get something out of the season. You look at it and say, why did they sack Frank Lampard? They're only 6 points off the top 4. And you think, no, they need to appoint a new manager because they should be in that top 4. With the money they spent, they should be. I know they're not leading at the moment, but Manchester United, in my opinion, have a weaker squad than Chelsea by quite some distance. I hand on heart believe that. And I think to see the difference in those two teams, in the league position and in some of the performances, is not quite good enough. And I think that's what it probably boils down to for Frank Lampard. I think it's been a lack of consistency in results, a lack of consistency in playing, and then also I think just a lack of consistency in team selection.
Yeah, and I only have a couple more questions about Lampard before we turn to, I guess, what Chelsea will look like going forward. But Joe, from a tactical point of view, I mean, yes, Chelsea, it came down to Lampard not being able to integrate his new signings with his sort of collective that he'd sort of developed over the previous season. Do you feel like with the signings they made and sort of the expectations put on them, do you feel like Lampard and maybe his coaching staff were guilty of sort of relying on their individual quality to get Chelsea out of a jam every time they were in trouble, and that his inability to sort of create an effective tactical plan was therefore exposed when those players just weren't on form, as we've seen with some of them time and time again?
There's certainly an argument to say that bringing in Tuchel, a German manager with a hell of a lot of experience with German players in the Bundesliga, is basically a way of them covering their investment. 72 million on Havertz is unforgivable in this current climate. 47.7 million for Werner is actually a lot more than you could have realistically got him for around that time. They have flagrantly breached financial fair play, and yet again, they will not face any punishment for it whatsoever. I'll remind you that the last transfer ban was because of illegal approaches to underage players. They got off scot-free when it came to FFP. The thing with Frank Lampard is it's all very well to credit him with this, how he's developed these young English players. Frank Lampard represents, to me, everything I hate about this country's footballing culture. This fetishization of attacking football, irrespective of its defensive mistakes. It doesn't matter if you're creating more chances than your last manager, if you're conceding 3 times as many to the opposition. This obsession with young British players, one of the many reasons apparently why Abramovich decided to pull the plug is because of how obsessed he's been this window with bringing in Declan Rice. If you're going to bring in a midfielder in the holding area from West Ham United, I'll give you a clue. It shouldn't be Declan Rice. It should be Thomas Tuchel. He fits Chelsea's system a hell of a lot more, but he's obsessed with these young English players. However, despite the fact he was willing to give Tomori such a chance at the beginning of last year, Tomori is now so unsettled that he's gone to Milan for the rest of the season. The amount that he relies on Mason Mount, a player who blows so hot and cold, he might as well be related to Katy Perry. We can talk about all of these young English players doing well last year. I mean, Callum Hudson-Odoi in the wilderness, so I don't know why people still talk about him. But there's no getting away from the fact that the 3 most important players to Chelsea last year were Jorginho, who he's consistently used incorrectly, so it's a miracle that he did as well last year as he did. Mateo Kovacic, who was the player they actually brought in during their transfer ban. I don't really call it a transfer ban if you've brought in almost £100 million worth of players in Kovacic and Pulisic, but that's besides the point. And Andreas Christensen, who granted did get injured recently, but as Ben made the point, Frank Lampard a couple of years ago was criticising Antonio Conte for constantly chopping and changing his centre-backs. Chelsea have been rotating between 5 starting centre-backs for the last 3 months, and their problems are consistent in every goddamn game. There are clear defensive issues with this manager, and the people are saying, should you have a back 3, a back 4, a back 5? These are discussions about small numbers. The truth is that if you look at his time at Derby and at Chelsea, Frank Lampard couldn't organise a defensive structure if he had 12 men behind the ball. So I think it's about time we stopped. Chelsea have finally understood. It worked with Conte, it worked with Mourinho, it worked with Sarri. Stop this ridiculous obsession with attacking football. It doesn't exactly mean very much if your football's attractive when there's no fans in the stadium, and focus on a true defensive philosophy and actually picking a consistent starting 11, and maybe, as a final point, using Havertz and Werner where they were played in Germany rather than playing them out of position constantly, and maybe playing the same team 3 games in a row. You might actually be able to get some cohesion in your starting 11.
I mean, I actually have something to say about that. Firstly, I have to defend Lampard's usage of Mason Mount. I think Mason Mount is an amazing player. And more importantly, I think if you look at recent games, especially, the one against Fulham, Mason Mount's one of the only players on that starting 11 that's actually playing for the club, that's actually playing for the shirt. The players have quit on Frank Lampard on that field time and time again this season, and that is why. I think that's why he's been rotating. And you say Jorginho was one of our most important players last year. Jorginho is completely useless. I have never watched a big game of football where I've been, thank God Jorginho is playing. He has one thing he does. He gets the ball and he passes it sideways. That's all he does. Doesn't matter where he is on the pitch. Doesn't matter what the score is. Doesn't matter who's around him. He gets the ball, stops it, passes it sideways. And last season, of course, we had Marcus Alonso and Kepa Arrizabalaga starting, and that was horrible. This season, we had Zuma and Thiago Silva. They were going really well. The problem is Rudiger decided because he's not starting, he's going to start a fight. He's going to start a lot of arguments behind the scenes. As Piliquera, Rudiger got into multiple arguments. Rudiger refusing. Rudiger was apparently one of the big reasons Frank Lampard got sacked, going to the board, saying he had no confidence in him because he wasn't starting. And you weren't starting because Thiago Silva and Zuma were better than you. There was no respect by the players for Frank Lampard. Yes, he was completely incorrect to be playing Werner on the left wing and Havertz on the right wing. I don't know why he did that. I don't know why he stuck with that for so long. Werner, I can sort of see he's really pacey, but clearly wasn't thriving there. And as I said earlier, yes, his failure to adapt obviously was one of his biggest flaws. But I think for the centre back thing, it was Rudiger causing a lot of a mess behind the scenes. For Mount, he's the only player that's actually putting in any amount of passion in there. For Jorginho, I understand his lack of tactical value to the team. I actually really want Jorginho sold. He means nothing. He contributes nothing to the team. Maybe if we're trying to hold on to a tight lead, he can come in. But if we're trying to actually score a goal, he's useless, and he's not necessarily a great defender. He's just really good at getting the ball and making sure we retain possession by playing the easiest possible pass. But yeah, I think I got to say I defend his usage of Mason Mount. I have to defend him rotating the centre backs. Obviously, that's bad for the players, but it's the players' fault in the first place. Along with Rudiger as well, I believe Marcus Alonso and Jorginho went to the club with their concerns about him, which is obviously what led to Azpilicueta's fight with Rudiger and all of that happened behind the scenes. The players have not been treating the club with enough respect.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to obviously unpack, and then I think Tammy Abraham tweeted today, and I think it says Azpilicueta as well, to kind of reaffirm their support for Antonio Rudiger. We don't know entirely what goes on behind the scenes, but it is interesting that, I guess, from my perspective, I mean, Zuma, had scored a fair few times this season. I think he's one of the highest scoring defenders, and then suddenly he's not played the last couple of games, which was interesting. Rudiger, who I was led to believe was on the way out, then ended up earning starts in the team, which was, I mean, it just to illustrate the point of Joe's point about how the centre backs, I guess, got chopped and changed a bit. But yeah, I mean, there's certainly, I mean, I agree with you, Nino. I think if I had to pick, if someone said pick Chelsea's player of the season so far, it would become a Mount or Chilwell. Sort of, to me, those are the two sort of instantly stand out. So certainly those two seem to be playing well regardless of how the team was. And who knows? I mean, with Jorginho, who knows? I mean, Spurs have shown with the Højbjerg signing that someone who does the sort of simple, dirty work can be very effective. And so it'll be interesting to see if Jorginho can adapt and do some of that under Tuchel. And I say this not as a Chelsea fan, so I don't entirely know, but yeah, I mean, just final point. I mean, I guess Lampard, he leaves the club with one of the lower points per game stats of those who have been in charge at Stamford Bridge in the Premier League era. Even lower than Andre Villas-Boas, and I think only Glenn Hoddle in Porterfield and Ruud Gullit leave the club with a lower rate. So, an interesting one. I feel like the effects of this decision will play out for the next few years or so. I was interested to ask Ninu. I mean, do you feel like, is there anything you're concerned with above the managerial job, like the recruitment strategy? Is there any concerns with the hierarchy at the moment, or do you feel like, do you feel like as though everything will sort of work itself out at the moment?
I mean, as everyone's sort of seemed to point out, us continuously sacking managers does actually work. I think we'll get more into Tuchel in specific a little ahead in the stream, so I'll save my points for then. But if you ask me whether it's a problem with the staff, I got to say I don't necessarily think so, especially not with the transfer recruitment. I know Joe believes Souček's a better player. I do think Souček probably fits our style better. But if you're looking for a defensive option, which, I think we do kind of need, because I just don't believe in Jorginho, I think Declan Rice fits that. As regards to actual signings, we probably had the best window. If you looked at the start of the season, we probably had the best transfer window in the entire Premier League. After the transfer window, we probably went from having on paper probably like fourth or fifth best team to like second or third best team in the Prem on paper. With if you don't consider depth and things like that, we had a wonderful window. We signed a brilliant striker, a wonderful German midfielder, Pulisic was the window before. Ziyech, who was in incredible form. We signed a left back, one of the best English left backs we could have signed. And yes, the goalkeeper signing was underwhelming, but he started off wonderfully. So I think the recruitment has been, and Thiago Silva on a free. right? Like the recruitment's been really good, but obviously the fans are dissatisfied with the constant merry-go-round of managers, and it can't be easy on the players, right? Like Lampard lost the dressing room. I mean, maybe not the majority of it, but clearly enough to get in the axe, right? He lost Rudiger, he lost Jorginho, and he lost Marcus Alonso. I don't care. I mean, none of the fans will care if he lost Marcus Alonso. Marcus Alonso is long overdue a transfer out of the club. He never should have been signed in the first place. But clearly it's taking a toll on the players. Clearly, like the constant merry-go-round of managers is taking a toll on players, and it's definitely taking a toll on the fans. Today itself, I believe some fans were outside the bridge. There was a streamer put out outside the bridge that said the circus continues. So I think that just goes to show. I think probably we'll forget about it if Tuchel does well, but if Tuchel doesn't do well, then maybe Roman's position with the fans will be a bit in jeopardy. But I don't know. Only time will tell.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see what I suppose an instant winning run will obviously do a lot for club morale. It's Frank Lampard's no longer at Chelsea, and we'll talk about Thomas Tuchel now. Obviously, comes in on I believe an initial 18-month contract, so short by a lot. I mean, managerial standards, but I guess given how volatile the industry is, I guess it sort of makes sense on that part. And obviously there were rumors of Julian Nagelsmann has done wonders at Leipzig. He was reported to be a long-term target. Ralf Rangnick, I think, was approached, who has been sort of a lead of the sort of Red Bull movement as well. He was approached on a short-term basis. I don't think he was interested in that. Obviously, you've got Max Allegri's out there. Just to put another name, I think someone like Valverde may have been interested. There were a fair few managers to choose from. I guess I come to you, Nino, as a Chelsea fan. What was your reaction to Tuchel getting the job? Are you excited, or was it underwhelming?
It's a tough one. I'm not a fan of Tuchel's style of football, if I'm being very honest. He did a pretty good job at Dortmund, but when I saw him at PSG, I was never impressed. I mean, yeah, he won a lot at PSG, but you could put anyone in a suit and have them manage that PSG team, and if they don't win the league every single year, they're probably the worst manager of all time. But that being said, I think the problem with Nagelsmann would have been, why would he leave Leipzig for a team that was ninth in the Prem? Right? Like, why would he do that? Why would he leave this project he was building for a risk where he could immediately probably get sacked he could get sacked within 6 months, and it'd be really tough to take them from ninth to like fourth. And we all know Roman's not going to be happy if we don't get fourth with this team. With regards to Valverde, I never saw him as a contender. I know he's unemployed, but he's never really linked with the job. So the two biggest options were Allegri and Tuchel. And as amazing as manager Allegri is, A, why would you want to take 10th place in the Prem? B, I think Tuchel might honestly be a better option than Allegri right now, for the simple fact that he's German, and the biggest problems in our team right now are German players. Rudiger, Kai Havertz, and Timo Werner all need to be bollocked by the manager, and luckily this manager can speak German, so he can do it in a way that they'll understand. So also, Tuchel already has a rapport with Christian Pulisic and with Thiago Silva. Of course, there was a bit of awkwardness between Thiago Silva and Tuchel, but hopefully that'll subside when he sees, Thiago Silva's reliability. And I think the thing with Silva as a player, this is a bit off topic, but even if he isn't starting, he provides a lot of value in training to the young centre-backs. So there's that. But still, he has a rapport with Pulisic and Thiago Silva, so hopefully he can help them recapture some of their prime form. And he can speak German, so hopefully he can yell at Rudiger, Werner, and Havertz, and more importantly, sort of figure out why they haven't been playing as well as they should, and try to figure out where they would play best in our tactical setup.
Yeah, and I want to ask Ben sort of the same question, really, because Ben, obviously, there was a time not so long ago where Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was close to the sack, and inevitably seems to be every so often, every now and then. Was Thomas Tuchel a name on the sort of shortlist you'd had for managers you wanted at Old Trafford at any point? Is he someone that you thought would do a good job in the Premier League? I mean, what's your reaction to him coming to the Premier League and ultimately ending up at Chelsea?
I think regarding Manchester United, and all Manchester United fans would agree with me on this, it was Mauricio Pochettino was the only name, I think, and no one could even consider another. Him being appointed by Chelsea, I think sacking Frank Lampard was, for them, just as much about taking this opportunity to get Thomas Tuchel. I don't think they expected that he'd be available. And obviously he was, so they needed to go out there and they were like, right, we need to get him now. I think, he is in there, I think, to improve some of the morale of the German players, to try and get them best performing. And it's not just to try and get them best performing on the pitch, it's to try and get them best performing from a marketing point of view. Chelsea can't be seen as this club that go out and spend so much cash and then players come here and just don't perform. No player's going to want to come there and not perform. Every player will want to go to Chelsea and perform well. So it's up to the club to make them perform well. And the manager has a big job in doing that. I think this year it's harder than ever with COVID because, like we spoke about before, it's one thing getting it. It's another thing not being able to travel and see your family or them come and see you. And then it's another thing you're not able to reimburse yourself into this new community in which you live, which is key if you're living in London. So I think, it's a difficult season to sort of kind of bring harmony to those players, but it needs to be done when you spend that amount of cash. And I think, Joe alluded to it before, you can't spend that amount of money on Kai Havertz with that risk. You can't do that. I think unless you definitely know you're going to get the best out of him. What you can't do is spend that much money and then constantly play him out of position and take him out of the team, which is what Frank Lampard did. So Thomas Tuchel needs to be there, I think, to, give support for these players and make them perform better, because those two are the key from a performance perspective. If they get the most out of them, they'll start to win games, but also just from a marketing perspective is, if they want to attract other players to a club, no player is going to want to come to a club where it's extremely difficult to perform. So that will be a thing. I think the struggle will be for Thomas Tuchel, and, Sam Allardyce spoke about this as well. Because of the sheer amount of games, it's really difficult to implement your style and your ideas on the training pitch. You don't get as much time this year on a training pitch. So I think it is going to be, more from kind of a mental aspect of him providing the players with support, providing them with confidence to go out there and really just run for the team and do whatever. I think definitely it will be like that for the first couple of months before we start to see his style implemented. So I think that's definitely why it makes sense. But that's also why I think he was appointed, because he was appointed so he can go and get the most out of these players alongside his tactics, obviously. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. But it was, I think sacking Frank Lampard was just as much to snap up Tuchel so he doesn't go anywhere else, just as much as getting rid of Frank, unfortunately. But yeah.
Yeah, and Joe, I mean, on the go for it. Go for it.
I was just going to say the lineup for Chelsea versus Wolves has just come out. So it's actually very interesting. It's a 4-2-3-1 with Kai Havertz playing behind the striker for the first time, I think, at Chelsea. So Havertz is finally playing in position. And interestingly enough, no Mason Mount in the team. Jorginho and Kovacic start. Rudiger, Thiago Silva at the back. No Timo Werner, no Christian Pulisic. Olivier Giroud starts up front with Hudson-Odoi and Hakim Ziyech on the wings. Havertz behind Giroud. Jorginho, Kovacic in the midfield. Aspilicueta, Rudiger, Silva, Chilwell at the back, and Edouard Mendy in goal.
And there we are. I've got it now there. So there we are. As Ninu has read it out, that is the lineup. I have no idea if Tuchel's picked it or whether an existing Chelsea staffer has picked it.
I think clearly Tuchel's picked that. If Mount's not starting, then I think Tuchel has picked that.
It's a complete change in formation, which is the first thing that stands out. Joe, I don't know if you have an instant reaction to this lineup.
Common sense prevails at last. Jesus Christ, how long has it taken? The highest expected goals player in the Premier League in 2020, Olivier Giroud, should be starting. He is starting. Jorginho, who is the sixth highest player in all of the English Football League for pass interceptions in the entire English Football League, he starts, as indeed he should. Maybe playing in a proper register role, he might actually be able to have some impact on this team, as he did under Sarri and Lampard last year. Rudiger and Silva at the back, on paper the best centre-back partnership by far. Havertz playing behind the striker. You pay 72 million for him. That's kind of what you'd expect. I'm surprised Callum Hudson-Odoi's in there, because quite frankly, I thought he was nothing. But yeah, thank God, common sense prevails. Maybe Edouard Mendy can stop his downward spiral because he's actually performing one of the worst goalkeepers in the Premier League for expected goals on the shot-stopping charts versus what he should be conceding. No, across the whole of 2020.
Fair enough. He had a very good start, to be fair, so hopefully he can sort of refine his
that's
stuff.
what I'm saying. He's gone downhill, just like he's in another
Okay. I thought you were saying he was always... Okay, fair.
Yeah. No, I mean, has anyone else got any thoughts on the lineup?
I mean, a bit of mixed feelings here. I do think Zuma should be starting over Rudiger, but I also do think Rudiger deserves a shot again. I'm happy with Kovacic starting. I'm not as happy with Jorginho, but maybe in this sort of lineup, he will start to impress again like he did on the Sarri. I never found him impressive under Lampard. A bit upset not to see Kante in there, although I think he's injured. So I'm not fully certain. I'm wondering how Kante will fit into this. I feel like he'd take Jorginho's place because Kovacic is more attacking. So I don't think Kante should be taking Kovacic's place. I was also surprised to see Hudson-Odoi, but I would have expected Pulisic, but I like Hudson-Odoi. I think he has a lot of potential, and I'm excited to see what he does. Havertz, Giroud, great combo. I think they would complement each other a little better than Werner and Havertz would. Giroud, in my opinion, is one of the best strikers in the Prem. He only gets better with age, and for Chelsea's style, Giroud's perfect. I love seeing him start. I love the man. So, I'm a bit hopeful out of the match. I'm not expecting Havertz to do much. It's going to take him a little time. He's not going to hit the ground running, but I'm a little more excited now that he's actually playing in his position. Maybe now we'll see what we paid for.
I mean, people who follow me on social media know I'm a big fan of the Bundesliga. So obviously I do sort of defend Havertz, and I know he's had COVID for a while. So, and the impacts of COVID obviously affect everyone to varying degrees. So who knows what's happening behind the scenes, but this is from my point of view, this is a very Thomas Tuchel sort of side. And Joe, I was going to ask what you thought of. I mean, this does sort of resemble Thomas Tuchel's side. Like, he likes to play with attacking fullbacks, as showed with Dortmund with Guerrero and Piszczek when he played at Dortmund, and Kazawa with PSG, and he plays with attacking fullbacks. He likes having those attacking wingers. That's where it was Tuchel who got the best out of Ousmane Dembele at Dortmund and Christian Pulisic at Dortmund as well. He got them goal scoring, even Mkhitaryan as well, before he got sold to Man United. So it does, and this does feel like, and even Aubameyang as well on the wing. So this does feel like you can see where his mind is going. And I was just going to ask for your perspective on the continent. Wise, he is regarded as one of the best coaches, at least in terms of tactics, and this lineup shows. You can start to see where he's sort of thinking and where he's sort of putting his stamp on this Chelsea team.
And he loves role players as well, doesn't he? Like, it's one thing to say he loves his attacking fullbacks, he loves his back four. This is what looks like a 4-2-3-1 to me. On the one hand, there's that, but also he loves players that play individual roles. So Rudiger and Thiago Silva, very asymmetrical, one of which is going to be a ball-playing midfielder, one of which more of like a no-nonsense centre-back. Thomas Tuchel loves that. It's actually worked very well for him. At PSG as well, Thiago Silva had one of his best seasons ever at PSG last year. I was surprised and quite impressed that Chelsea were able to get him in, probably because of the amount of money they were paying him. Jorginho, as I've already said, Regista, one of the best you'll find on the continent. Even last year, when Lampard wasn't using him properly, he had one of the highest expected goals assists in European football, which is just mental. And I'm hoping that with a pivot alongside him of Kovacic, who again is more of a relatively box-to-box option, that makes an awful lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, I like the look of this. I don't think we can read too much into it. He's literally just arrived. There's a good chance, actually, that Tuchel hasn't picked this. It's just going to be one of the coaching staff who thinks they know what he likes. I don't think we can read too much into whatever the result is tonight. But yeah, I like this. And Giroud up front as well. I know that a lot of his XG comes from the fact that he's a substitute late in games. But if you look at Olivier Giroud, ever since he joined Chelsea, he's actually been very impressive as a starter. So no, I like this.
Yeah, and Ben, I did want to ask, because it looked, and I mean, we only have one lineup to go off as a sample size so far, but obviously he plays with sort of one striker flanked with two players normally in either 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1, primarily the latter. It does feel like and this was sort of my assumption when Timo Werner first signed for Chelsea, one of Giroud, Werner, or Abraham was going to have to yield that starting spot and probably that bench spot as well, and see limited game time in comparison. Do you sense that as well, or do you feel like Chelsea should, stop persisting, I guess, with and try to sort of playing one of those three players I've mentioned, or do you still see a system in which they can try and squeeze as many as they can and play effective football?
No, I think they've got to go with one up front. If that's what Thomas Tuchel knows, then that's what they've got to go with. And I think I always thought that one of them was going to go. I think he's gone for Giroud here because I think Giroud's the most trustworthy out of all three of them. I think he's probably the most likely to score, most likely to do a job. I think, because Timo Werner's German, it probably looks like Abraham might be the one who gets on the back foot. But who knows if he starts scoring? Like the guys have said, we don't actually really know who's picked this lineup. The one thing I'd say that whoever picks this lineup, whether it be someone who was there at Chelsea under Lampard, Tuchel, someone else, Reece James had to come out of that team. I've been watching Reece James, and his lapses of concentration at the back is appalling. It is awful. I against Leicester, I was astounded at what I saw because I know that I learnt that in under sevens. So that was shocking to see. So he had to come out of there, and he had to get Azpilicueta in there. I like Reece James going forward, I do, but I just think if it's a shaky back four anyway, you can't have someone who's going to have lapses of concentration like that, whoever picks the starting lineup.
Yeah. It's, it is sort of a very frenetic time. And as Trent, I'm going to take this down, by the way, Trent Alexander-Arnold sort of has learned, he's accumulated a lot of game time, and that sort of impacted his performances as well. And he looks a bit jaded. Maybe he needs a break. Obviously, this time of the year is uncompromising when it comes to fitness and game time. And so we will see what happens with that. Just as I keep referring to you as the Chelsea fan on the panel, what are your expectations sort of for the rest of the season? Because anytime a managerial change is made mid-season, you can kind of consider that season a bit of a wash until the next full season, I guess Tuchel has.
Yeah.
What do you, what do you expect?
With the talent we have in the squad, I'm not going to say it's a wash. I do expect us to finish well above where we are in the league right now. It's important to remember, not that many game weeks ago. Yeah, a significant amount. I think about 7-8 game weeks ago, we were top of the league. I'm not saying, we're going to challenge. I don't really expect us to challenge for anything at this point now. Maybe one of the domestic cups, but not the one we were knocked out, not the Capital One Cup, maybe the FA Cup. But I do think now it's just about getting Tuchel comfortable with the team and getting Werner and Havertz's confidence back. So, I'd be happy if we finish fourth, but I'm expecting maybe fifth or sixth, realistically. But I do think fourth is a possibility.
Yeah, it's tough to say, isn't it? Because of this season with games being postponed with COVID and then being rescheduled days notice, and you wonder how much time he's going to get on the training pitch to kind of educate his players in terms of the system versus sort of just having to get them rested for games. And Joe, he has a strong rapport with players. We know that PSG, the players, he got on with a lot of them. Same with Dortmund as well. It's his relationship with those above, on the board and sporting directors and such, that has sort of come under question marks at the moment, because he's had a spotty record with Leonardo, obviously at PSG being most recent. He didn't get on with Sven Mislintat, who was once at Arsenal's head of recruitment when they were together at Stuttgart. He didn't get, or Mainz, I think, he didn't get on with him either. Is that is sort of the worry, isn't it? That at some point this might combust. Who knows when, but at some point when it comes to decision making, somehow this relationship will sort of combust, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but it's Roman Abramovich, so he's going to get sacked within 18 months anyway. It doesn't honestly, it doesn't matter how acrimonious his relationship with the board is, because Chelsea appoint managers short term, because that is what's worked ever since the start of the Abramovich era. So honestly, it doesn't make an awful lot of sense. If he's getting the most out of his playing staff, which Lampard was clearly unable to do, then that's an immediate improvement. And honestly, they'll probably like him on account of the fact that he's protecting the crazy investments they made last summer. And also, as Ninu said, they were top of the league recently with one of the best defensive records in the Prem. I can go through a myriad of reasons why neither of those are actually that impressive in the context of the Premier League this year. However, the salient points are these. Ben's already said that he thinks Chelsea have a better squad than Man United. I agree. Man City are clearly unfinished. They've got a lot of errors going forward. Sorry? Oh, that's just me on the backup. Sorry. Liverpool are so hemorrhaged in terms of injuries. They were actually looking at signing Socrates. Leicester, again, they've just lost Vardy and don't look particularly consistent going forward. For me, top 4 is a minimum for Thomas Tuchel. And luckily, with there being basically no fantastic teams in the Premier League this year, it's pretty easily achievable. Get a good run of form together, which is ultimately what's the lack thereof is what sacked Frank Lampard in the end. Get a good run of form together, and this team could be on Man United's heels for the title. Really, it is that close this year.
Yeah, there's a strong chance. I mean, we've seen what a good run of form does for United and City, who were at times considered sort of a bit behind the pack and now sort of vaulted themselves towards the front. Obviously, Leicester on a very good run of form as well. That's helped their case as well for the top 4. So it'll be very interesting to sort of see what happens. I mean, Ben, as sort of a team of a fan of a rival club at the moment. I mean, are you sort of worried about this? I mean, Tuchel coming out of Chelsea, obviously you expect them to be much improved under Lampard, which obviously isn't great for a United fan. But do you see yourself being pushed by this team? You already talked about their squad, obviously, and I mean, what are your thoughts about where this team will go forward in the future in terms of can they kind of establish themselves as a contender for the Premier League for at least the next season or so?
Yeah, I agree with Joe. I think top 4 is definitely a minimum. They're 6 points off of it, and I think last year, if you look at the top 4, both Chelsea and Manchester United managed to gain top 4 from being much further than 6 points down. So I think it's definitely doable in this climate. And I think, as a Manchester United fan, I think you're probably almost worried about yourself slipping up rather than the others around you overtaking you. So, but it does bring threat to the league. I think more so maybe Liverpool will be a bit fearful. I think it's because of the potential that squad has. That's the thing. They've got so many brilliant players in there that if he can get them playing, then they will be title contenders. Do I think they could win the title? Probably not, because I think there's not as much time to integrate his ideas at the moment. But they definitely can give it a go, and they definitely can get in the top 4. Obviously, if he doesn't get results, then they will just sack him. We've seen that. So yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting one for him, and how well he can do. Nobody expects the results tonight, but this isn't exactly a very strong Wolves team. So I think they can go out there, and I think they, anything other than a draw is a really good result for Chelsea. So a draw and a win, they're really good results for Chelsea. So I think that's what really happened. In the near future, we can't expect too much of him. Like we said, it's going to take time for him to maybe, calm some players down, get them to settle in and everything, develop some consistency. He's going to have to chop and change his lineup. I know we criticized Lampard for it, but that's 18 months into a job. This guy's been in there for a day. So he's going to have to chop and change his lineup, and maybe actually fixture congestion will allow that. It will seem like maybe he'll develop his best team, or what he perceives as his best team, quicker than most managers. So he could almost use that to his advantage. So I think it'll be interesting to see how he does, especially tonight. We get an indication of him on the touchline, although it might just be kind of observation of his players, understandably so. So. Yeah, I think really they've got to be aiming for that top 4. They're much closer than I think people think when they see that. If they see the news that Frank Lampard's been sacked, they're actually only 6 points, which like I said, in this current climate is very easy ground to make up. I know. So yeah, I think pretty much target would be to get playing as soon as possible and make sure you stay above Arsenal.
Yeah. I sort of want to give the final word to Nino on this. I'm just curious to know, what are your sort of expectations for Tuchel's reign, and what sort of the criteria that will kind of make it a success, and what will sort of, is there anything that you feel, if something is there anything that you feel will spell the end of for him? Is there something that will kind of be? Is there something that could happen, an event or a bad run of form? Is there something that a sort of criteria that then will say, oh no, we might need to change him? I'm just curious to know what your expectations are, really.
I mean, I think as previously mentioned, fourth place probably this season, and next season is a tough one. Obviously, depends a lot on the window. It depends a lot on what goes on with the team. I'm not expecting, to win anything next year. Honestly, if I'm being very honest, nothing to do with the team. I just simply don't think. I just simply do not think Tuchel is remarkable enough as a manager to win the Premier League. Especially with the wonderful managers and teams we have. Of course, this season's been a bit weird. No team's been dominating. Like normally, you'd have at least one team by match week 19 or match week 20 that's ahead of the pack, but nothing so far. This Premier League set a record. Most number of different teams leading at the end of a match week. I think what's going to happen, he's going to stabilize the team, and then at the end of 18 months, then he's going to get the sack, because at the end of the day, Abramovich gets his way. Abramovich is God, and that's all that's going to happen. He's not going to win a lot. We might win a cup here or there, but I don't think we're going to be challenging for the Prem, let alone UCL.
So, in your words, we should prepare for a return for Avram Grant or Gus Hiddink or someone of that kind, or Roberto Di Matteo.
I mean, I don't know. We'll have to see. Maybe he'll last 24 months at 18, because if he's doing well enough, he probably won't get sacked midway through next season. 18 would be the end of next season. So actually, no, yeah. We may see just, another axe on the chopping block for Roman Abramovich. Maybe another unremarkable manager. I don't know. I mean, there's always, anything can happen in the Premier League. It's the Premier League. Literally, you never know. Like, you seriously can't tell. Sometimes anything can happen. So, but I think maybe third next season. I do think with the squad we have, we easily shouldn't be finishing below anybody except for City or Liverpool. Whether we make it tough for them, whether we make them sweat, depends on a lot. We'll have to look at the transfer window, of course. But yeah, I think if the squads stay the same going into next season, that is.
That's fair enough. Joe, did you want to make a point on Lampard before we wrap up that bit, or?
It was just that you mentioned the name Avram Grant, who actually has the highest points per game average of any player, any manager of Chelsea in the Abramovich era, which kind of sums up their approach to managers in general. Best of luck to Thomas Tuchel. That's all I can really say. I think that, to be honest, with the way Liverpool are going this year, a genuine regression. When you ignore their injuries, they're not actually getting better. They're getting worse. I honestly think Chelsea could finish even higher than third next year. I mean, City look good. They finally have a centre-back partnership. It's only taken them 5 years under Guardiola to do it. But with the exception of them, I don't think there's a team that on paper look that much better than what this Chelsea team do right now. It's just about, can you get the most out of your players? I think Tuchel can.
I think we're in this era where, I guess, if the pandemic hadn't happened, we would have thought Liverpool might have kicked on and, I don't know, created some sort of dynasty or at least a period of success, and that hasn't happened. And now we're sort of, Man City is still in that sort of prime, but obviously United are coming up. You've got Leicester as well coming up. It's sort of an uncertain period at the moment where we're not quite sure who kind of takes the alpha dog position in the Premier League. And so that's what makes it sort of exciting at this point. Just quickly, I know this was sort of a Chelsea special on Lampard and Tuchel, but beforehand, I mean, their rivals in North London had the big news of the day with Martin Odegaard signing. We sort of, Ben, I know you sort of talked about it on Saturday a little bit when it was sort of coming together. It's now been officially confirmed. He's on there for a loan deal to the end of the season. Joe, I know, obviously, I know you and certainly Luke Edwards, when you and him kind of had a podcast together, you followed Spanish football a fair bit, and obviously he had a very successful season last year. Well, sort of, I guess. Well, I mean, what are your thoughts on Odegaard coming to Arsenal?
Just quick. I'll be very, very quick. He was very good at the first half of the season for Sociedad, maybe even the best player in the Liga. Second half of the season, really not so much. Wasn't that great after the lockdown period. It's very typical that Zinedine Zidane won't give him any game time because that's the way Zidane is. My honest opinion is, as I've said in the private chat, he's going to be Dani Ceballos 2.0, a player who is incredibly good, probably too good for this Arsenal team, who are now a mid-table Premier League side, and the coaching staff will let him down because they always let down players who come in on loan. That's my only argument.
Fair enough. Ben, I know you did. Is there any reaction to the move? Is it a good one, bad one? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I was going to say it makes sense. You know, you're taking a creative player and bringing him into a team that has zero creativity. I think I said obviously last week as well, it might be quite good because he's a little bit more versatile, so he can maybe play out on the right and you can still play Emil Smith-Rowe because obviously he's been doing well. But really, yeah, I 100% agree with Joe. I don't think it's just loan signings they let down. I think Arsenal pretty much let any signing down. What have we seen with Willian? You know, what have we seen with every single player there? They go there and they miserably fail. So, you know, I mean, I know Pepe scored last night, but I still, you know, watching him sometimes makes me cry. So I think, yeah, it always seems like a good signing with Arsenal, and it never is, or very rarely is. So I think that's what I have to say on that. Maybe he can break the trend. Who knows?
Yeah, I guess I'll close and say, unless, you know, I'm excited to see what he can do. I've also seen this before with Denis Suarez coming to Arsenal. He was there on loan for a little bit. Yeah, Joe, now you remember that didn't work out. Kim Kallstrom obviously came and then got injured and never actually played a minute for Arsenal on loan. I feel like we've seen this happen before, so it'll be very interesting to see if there's any change to it. But yeah, that will wrap it up for us. We've been going on for an hour, which is probably about the right time to wrap it up. I want to extend my thanks to Ninu, to Ben, to Joe, all three of you for coming on, sharing your opinions, because this, as I said, this is probably the sporting news of the week. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And obviously the Thomas Tuchel reign starts tonight against Wolves. I think it's at like 8 o'clock or something. I don't know. I'm not. Yeah. I'm not an ad for Sky. I'm not employed by Sky. I'm not doing an ad for them. But yeah, we'll see what happens, and we will be back at some point at some point either this week or next week to talk about the latest in the sporting world. So thank you everyone for watching, and we will see you then.